Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little bit of chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. And my name is the Dead Man. Um, and I'm here 8 p.m. Um, Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays and Thursdays is the time for the show in case anyone is out there that is new. Uh, because I did receive a new subscription from a personal friend of mine. So if she's out there listening, those are the times that I'm here in the days. So today's episode is TNG season 1 episode 11 Haven. And when I chose when I pressed the randomizer button last night to for it to choose the episode that I'm going to review, um, it first went to Picard, which I'm not doing. I'm not doing modern Trek. I'm only doing classic Star Trek, the original series, TNG, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise. So modern Trek is off the table, and I'm not doing the animated series. So anyway, just to clear things up, so then I had to randomize again, and it landed on this episode, and I could not remember for the life of me what the episode was about, and now I know why. Because it's a Troy centered episode, and those episodes, Troy centered episodes, are horrible. I'm not a big fan of Troy as a character, other than her assets, if you know what I mean. And she's basically a waste of a character, and I don't like the idea of having a counselor on board the ship. That's I guarantee you James Kirk would hate that idea too. And me being originally a fan of the original series, when I started watching TNG, like many people, I did not like it. Uh, and look, I didn't grow up in the '60s, obviously, but but I dealt. My first exposure to Star Trek was the original series, and I guess the first movie I watched was Star Trek the Voyage Home. So going into the first season, I think most people would agree that the first two seasons of TNG are pretty bad. Though granted, there are some really good episodes. Um, I'm trying to think. Encounter at Farpoint is decent because it introduces Q in season one. Season one has conspiracy at the end, uh, and then there's is season one neutral zone. I think is maybe, um, or maybe that's season two. Uh, I'd have to look it up. There's a couple of good solid Measure of the Man in season two. Season one. Um, there's another Q episode where Riker gets powers. Hiding Q. But there's not a whole lot of good ones. Better than season one of Star Trek Academy so far. Although I will grant them that episode 4 of Star Trek Academy is a better episode with character with a character-driven story, but that's not saying much, considering the first three. It's like saying I took a solid dump today, whereas the past 3 weeks I've had massive diarrhea. You know, that's you know, it's it's a slight improvement over what it was total totally, especially the third episode was unwatchable towards a certain point. Like I'm literally like trying to watch it, and I'm like I can't watch this nonsense, and I'm gonna do other things on my computer, and I'm not even paying attention, barely. But enough about that. Uh, if you want to know what I thought the episode briefly. The episode I thought was the plot was predictable. The or the ending solution was predictable. The end. There's a battle at the end, which was rushed, and it was. I would say it was a good effort, but they couldn't quite stick the landing, and I gave it a 5.5 out of 10, whereas I think the episode from last week I gave it like a 4.5 or so, maybe a 5 even. I don't know. I don't remember. The first episode was like even lower, like a 3.5. Anyway, enough about that. So we get this captain's log explaining that they are orbiting a planet called Haven, which is supposed to have mystical healing powers, or at least that's sort of been a rumor or legend. And Picard is talking to Data, and Data states that it's a legend unsupported by facts. And then Riker's in his quarters. He's watching this hologram of two women playing a harp, and Tasha Yar calls him to Transporter One, where they're detecting an object um, that's being beamed on board. They don't know what it is, but they beam it up anyway, which you would think is kind of dangerous. But the the transporter deck apparently supposedly is supposed to filter out like any biological entities and weapons and stuff like that. Not always the case, as we all know and we've all seen. Considering the episode that I reviewed last night was a yet another transporter um, accident, and which goes all the way back to the original series. But they beam it up anyway, and it's this gray box with a face on it, and um, the face says that this is a present for a bonding ritual for Troy, and Riker's there, and I already said the Riker was there. Troy, I guess Troy walks in, and it's for her, and it's a bunch of jewelry and stuff, and she's supposed to be getting married, and that's the teaser. So, in Picard's ready room, Troy, Riker, and Picard are talking about this situation, and she says that she wasn't expecting this to happen, because she thought she would be far. Uh, but it did come up because the the Miller family who were friends with um, Troy Deanna's father, who's human, and they're human, uh, wanted to sort of push the issue, and the father's name is Stephen Miller. Now, there's two jokes here, right? There's Stephen Miller, who is Trump's right hand man or whatever. You could say that Stephen Miller somehow survived all the way to the 24th century. But the better joke for me would be um Steve Miller Band, and he wants to keep on rocking, baby. Uh, so I got that joke, that two for one. So Picard congratulates her, and then Riker's kind of upset about the situation, and she senses this, and she understands why, and the whole situation, because they were in a relationship before. Data walks in and says there's a message from Haven, and and the wedding part, and says that the wedding party is ready to beam up. So she goes back to the transporter room, and the wedding party beams up. So the father and the mom and the son, and her fiance's name is Wyatt, and he brings her a rose, which changes colors depending on your mood, and the color is currently like a velvet color. Then Wyatt says that the parents need to leave the room, and the father is wondering why he's not tired. Um, and the mother says that Mrs. Troy looks Loaxana Troy. I cannot say that word. Um, and Gavin Blackburn's here. Hello. Um, Says that she won't beam up until they leave, because they used to be friends and then had a little bit of falling out, or she outgrew them or whatever. And um, Deanna warns Picard that her mother is kind of eccentric. So she beams on board, and well, there's two life forms they detect, uh, and Picard says to go ahead and beam them aboard, and it's her and this big tall guy that looks like, well, he's played Lurch on the Addams Family. Big tall guy with white skin and a white outfit, or a grayish outfit, and a big giant piece of luggage. So I think most people are probably familiar with you know, this episode. And although I couldn't remember what it was about, because it's a Troy centered episode, and I don't like Troy centered episodes. They immediately vanish from my memory, except for the one where there's another Betazoid guy who gets injured, and she's like floating in the green space, and he's trying to send a message and all this stuff, and it's really annoying. Anyway, so at this point, we notice that the rose turns white. What that means, what kind of mood she's in, we don't know. But Luxwana Troy, who is who comes aboard and um, played by the great Majel Barrett, who also voices the computer and, as we know, was married to Gene Roddenberry. Um, and makes several appearances between TNG and a couple appearances on Deep Space Nine. So she's kind of eccentric. She's talking to Troy, Diana, in her mind, um, trying to encourage her to talk this way, and which also conflicts with what we see on Star Trek Academy, but I'm not going to even go there. They have their own. They have like sign language for a deaf guy, and they don't. They don't talk. Anyway. Anyway. So then there's a message from Haven, and so we're back on the bridge, and Picard's on the bridge, and oh, there's a one little joke with the luggage where she asked Picard to carry her luggage, and he says he'd be glad to, and he goes to pick it up, and it's really heavy, and he can barely carry it. And Deanna's embarrassed by this and says that a captain, it's beneath him to be carrying her luggage. And then there's a point in the corridors where they argue about this, and then Mr. Holm is the tall guy, Lurch's name, and he easily picks it up, and Picard just kind of looks at him, and he's, dumbfounded. Anyway, there's a message from Haven that there's an incoming vessel, and it's bypassing their Stargate, which I guess is like their protective grid. It's not a Stargate like Stargate Atlanta, or like the movie or whatever. And they tried hailing him. There's no response, and basically asked Picard to protect them because they have a treaty with the Federation and they don't have any major defenses. Then Troy visits Wyatt and apologizes for her mom's behavior, and they talk about their feelings about the situation and how he asks her some questions about her mind reading abilities, and she says that sometimes she can read people's minds, sometimes she can't. And this is this is going to come into play throughout the whole entire series, and then I guess people bring that up all the time. I've brought it up too. I did forget that she said that. So that's like their excuse for her not being able to end the episode in 20 seconds whenever there's a bad guy or something. So Wyatt, she notices that Wyatt has these paintings of this blonde woman and asks about her, and he says that he dreams about her since he was a kid, but he doesn't know who she is, and she always like calls out to him in his dreams, and he always thought it was Deanna because of her mind reading or her abilities, and she says that it wasn't her. So Picard has a personal log where he's concerned about Deanna, not just because he's losing his counselor, but or valuable crew member, but also because of these traditions that the Betazoids have, but he knows that he can't interfere, but he feels like that she's being trapped into them. And she also mentions to Wyatt that she I think it's not Wyatt. She mentions to somebody else that she's not too sure about this whole thing. I think maybe it was Riker. I don't remember. So then they figure out, they zoom in on the vessel and they call it a Trellian vessel. And as the Trellian people were believed to be extinct, and we go to the observation lounge where Data is explaining that they had Data and Crusher are explaining that they were had technology similar to late 20th century, in their knowledge. I guess they have warp. They're warp capable, but they have knowledge similar to the 24th century, and there were two factions that went to war with each other. One faction released a biological weapon on the other, which ended up killing them, but then they contracted this disease as well. So it kind of backfired on them. And basically, Data says that it'll be 13 hours until the ship arrives at Haven. So then there's a dinner reception, and basically Data is inspecting Mr. Holm, who's throwing him back pretty quickly, and he doesn't talk or say anything. I guess the not talking and not saying anything are the same thing. So that's where your edit would be, but I don't edit here at the Grateful Trek. So then Lwaxana is arguing over what kind of wedding they should have, and the Millers, the Steve Miller Band, says that it should be a traditional human wedding, and Lwaxana wants a Betazoid wedding. And then Mr. Holm is chiming in the background, hitting this chime, which was really an annoying sound. And then Data wants to know more about the wedding ceremony, the Betazoid wedding ceremony, and she says that everyone is naked, and the two moms are basically bickering back and forth. Lwaxana has this little vine plant on her arm and asks the mom if she likes pets, and she replies that she does. And so the arm vine, it's kind of like a snake, and it starts to get on her arm, and they're basically bickering, and the mom gets freaked out about the vine, and then Deanna gets pissed off and storms out and tells everybody to stop bickering. And then as she leaves, Data says he likes the bickering. I guess he finds it interesting. So then the camera pans to Riker, who's on the holodeck, staring out at a desert sunset on some planet, and basically moping. And she walks in and starts to talk to him, and they again talk about their feelings. And I've complained, and you've seen other people complain about Star Trek Discovery, how they're talking about their feelings and stuff. I want to apologize to Star Trek Discovery, at least a tiny, tiny little bit, because in this episode, talking about the feelings are basically on the same level with the lack of crying, I guess. And then Wyatt walks in, and Riker leaves, kind of storms off in a way, and he tells Deanna that basically she shamed them into a compromise, that some people would still be naked, mainly. Uh, Gavin Blackburn says apologies. No apologies. Okay, well, I'll say that people did point out to me that there were discussions of feelings on TNG, and I said to those people that it wasn't the same, but in this episode, it is very similar. I'll say that. So maybe I was misremembering. That doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it any better. That doesn't excuse, just because something stupid was done in a past show doesn't make it okay for the same stupid shit to happen in the new show, especially when you have the past to look back on and say, oh, that didn't work. Anyway. And Wyatt asks her if she really wants to go through with it, and she says yes, after having these reservations before. So I don't know, and all this bickering. So I don't know what changed her mind, other than maybe Riker is just does he can't reconcile his feelings, and he's also dead set on a path for captaincy. And maybe Riker didn't step up to the plate and say, "Look, I'm still in love with you. Let's get back together." Blah 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 blah. So maybe that's why she was willing to still go ahead with it. And then they kiss. Then there's another message from Haven, and they want the Tyrellian ship is now in beaming range, and they want Picard to destroy it, because if they beam down, they'll conflict. They'll get the disease as well, and it'll destroy their society. But of course, Picard says no. He's not going to just straight up destroy them. And then he basically asks Yar to tractor beam the ship away from the planet. So they get a tractor beam on it, and then there's a message from the Tyrellian ship, and we see this man, older gentleman, and a young, pretty woman, and then Deanna looks at the woman and says, "It's the woman from Wyatt's drawings." And then they talk about how Picard talks about how the rumors of Haven are exaggerated, and that they can't just beam down there and be healed. And the man says, we'll talk about that later. We first want to see Wyatt. So, and they're still infected, and they say that they just want to go die on a beach, or if they absolutely have to stay on the ship, then they'll just die on the ship. So Wyatt comes to the bridge and is kind of flabbergasted, and then he goes to talk to Loxana, and she basically reads his mind and sort of understands what he's trying to say, and she implies that it's his fate. That's the implication. They don't say that, but that's the implication. If you know that one. So they're getting ready to send medical supplies via the transporter, but because Wyatt, I forgot to mention, he wanted to be a doctor, or he's studying to be a doctor. Um, so he's in sick bay with Crusher, and uh, they're getting ready to send medical supplies to the Trellian ship, and he steals a hyperspray and goes to the transporter room, and the transporter chief says to just set the supplies on the transporter pad. So he does that, and then he sneaks up behind the transporter chief, gives him the hyperspray, and knocks him out. And then he beams onto the ship, and as he's entering like the corridor, there's all these pictures of him through different stages of his life, and they welcome him on board. And the girl steps out, and she says, "I knew that you would come, and you would be so brave to help us." And then the parents run to Picard and demand he do something about it. And Picard says that if he could have stopped it, he would have, but um, he couldn't. And then there's a message from them where Wyatt says that he's going to stay on board and try to continue to work for a cure. And then the Millers leave, and then Loxana follows behind, but says that she wants to look for another lover, and she says that she would pick Picard, but Picard's too old, even though Picard's attracted to her. Then she turns to Riker, and Deanna gets mad and says he has other plans, and she's basically like, "Okay, excuse me," and beams away and makes a joke that Picard says something like, "Even so and so didn't think that dirty thoughts," and then Deanna says it was just a joke, and he says, "I wasn't amused." And that's the episode. So I gave it a 5 out of 10. Mid episode. Again, I don't like Troy centered episodes. They're very not memorable. Hence the fact that I couldn't even remember the plot when when the random generator chose it. I recognized the title, but not the plot, which happens. It's not very memorable, other than the suitcase scene, which you see oftentimes in promotions, which was a funny joke. I'll give it that. And of course, the talking head box, um, which you also often see. There's another talking head thing that shows up later, I think, with Troy, with Luxana. I do like her. This is our introduction of her, and she becomes a very interesting character with some interesting episodes that involve her. And we get one, one of the most famous ones is where they get kidnapped, and Picard by the Ferengi, and Picard has to get her back. Um, the the one with Odo on Deep Space Nine. There's one with Alexander, where the famous Worf mud bath thing. Um, there's a couple other ones. She's basically just comic relief, and so she's a good character. I'm glad she was introduced, and I'm glad that we got to see more of her later on. So as far as that adding to the plot of the episode, I guess that's where it gets points. It gets points for being lighthearted, not being too serious. Um, they don't explain how the girl was able to get into Wyatt's mind or whatever, or how that even worked. So I guess they also have telepathy. They left that unanswered. They. What else can I say? There's not much else to say. It's it's not like the greatest. It's okay. It's, it's not the greatest episode on Earth, on TNG. As for season one, It's better than, like, say, Justice, or the 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 one with Artemis, where Yar gets killed, or you know. So as for TNG, okay, it's a better episode. So yeah, not much to say. Not like last night. Had more to say about that episode, Drone. Um, but let's see what people are saying in the chat. Oh yeah, Gavin doesn't want me to apologize for Discovery. I'll just say like this. It says TNG season one was terrible, but at least it course corrected. Yeah, good point. Good point. At least it course corrected. Discovery never did. They kept saying they were going to. Every season they would say, "Oh, we're going to go back to the old way, and we're going to do this and that," and they just kept doing the same mystery box season after season with the same whining and same everything that was bad from the beginning. So that's a good point. Um, yeah, they actually listened to the fans. They actually had fans that became writers. Uh, they just doubled down on Discovery and Strange New Worlds too. They keep saying they keep it's the same. It's just the same stuff with these stupid jokes. The teenage writing, or not the teenage writing. The discussions. The way they talk is like a teenager. The modern vernacular. The this the fourth episode of Starfleet Academy was a very slight improvement, but that's not saying much. I mean, it's really not. At least they took the episode seriously, but they still managed to throw in a dick joke and had the Doctor using curse words. Um, what else is being said? Michelle Fairy Tales says that she just started rewatching TNG and didn't think this was a terrible episode. I don't think it's terrible. I think Deanna Troy's mom was funny. Yeah, I agree. Loexana's mom is funny. And I don't think it's terrible. Gavin Blackburn says, "You got New Trek fans saying New Trek is great, but even the producers apologize for the low quality Strange New World season 3. What they should apologize for, season 3, oh yeah, that was when they did the K-pop Klingons. They really should apologize for season 4 when they shat on Roddenberry and Shatner, and they kept doing gimmick after gimmick after gimmick. Season 3 also was Bacon Spock, wasn't it? Was that season 3? Maybe that was. And then season 4 had uh, number one, who was somehow in love with Patton Oswalt, Vulcan, so they should apologize for that instead, and but they don't. like you say, they don't make any effort to make it change, and then they, um, or was that season 3? Are we have we done season 4 of Strange New Worlds yet? It all blends together. Um, I will say this. Um, Bacon Spock at least gave Teague his great meme. Yeah. And I'm going to hop on over to Teague's show at 9 o'clock. So Admiral Teague he'll be reviewing episode 4 of Starfleet Academy at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm not going to be on the panel, but I'll be there in the chat. What was I going to say about... There was something else I was going to say about Strange New Worlds, but I don't remember. Oh, I was going to say that there were 2 episodes, if you remember, when they first introduced Pike in Discovery Season 2, where they went back to Talos 4 and all that stuff. I thought that was a decent episode, nice connection to TOS, but that's that they had a moment there and they just said, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do gimmick after gimmick after gimmick. Oh, okay. So let's get to the portion of the night where fate chooses the next episode. And as you can see, it hasn't changed. Even random episode, or randomize again. TNG episode, or season 1, episode 13, Data Lore. Okay. Yeah, there you go. There's a good episode. Data Lore. So I'll be back next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Same time, same bad time, same bad channel, to do a review of season 1 of TNG, episode 13, Data Lore, where I'll probably have more positive things to say. So I want to thank Michelle Fairy Tales and Gavin Blackburn for showing up tonight. Anyone that's out lurking, and anyone that watches this in the future, have a good night and stay warm, because it is freaking cold out there, my friends.